Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of our deck list review. So today we're going over the Standard Open in Cleveland, which was won by Bant Heroic by Ross Merriam. So again, these videos, I'm going to try to make this one a little bit faster than the last one. I want to tell you how the deck works, why you want to play it, and what it's good against. And once we get those three things out of the way, we'll try to cover a little bit of the strategy, and then we'll keep on moving. So Ross Merriam played Bant Heroic, which was one of the best decks for the weekend because it goes underneath all the Esper Dragon decks that we'll talk about soon when we get there. Anyway, so what Bant Heroic wants to do is play a little dork, like there's the Battle White Hoplite, Favorite Hoplite, Hero Varroas, Laguna Band Trailblazer. Can you believe this thing actually won $5,000? Monastery Mentor, which was fantastic because there's hardly any red out there for the weekend. At least there wasn't, at least based on what I could sort of tell and what they were saying the metagame was made out of. And of course, Seeker of the Way is great. So here you got all these really sweet creatures, and Favorite Hoplite being really the best one to use because it's got that really sweet ability that would prevent all damage that would be dealt to it. And of course, you have a bunch of tiny, or you have a bunch of enchantments and instants that will target your dudes, including Ordeal of Heliod, Ordeal of Thassa, to not only get counters when it's targeting Hero of Iroas and targeting Favorite Hoplite, because they have the heroic ability, but also, of course, to get those sweet bonuses where you're getting cards and you're getting lots and lots of life. It's playing, of course, Johnny's Presence and Defiant Strike is your 1 mana spells alongside your God's Willing. Excuse me. These are as good as they get for 1 mana. For a white mana, you get a bonus and you get to draw a card. That's a big deal. Johnny's Presence will save your guy when they try to kill it, and God's Willing will do the same. And not only that, will let you get through a huge horde of like big, huge green creatures that are stopping you from attacking them. It's splashing green only for Dromoka's command because this command is absolutely ridiculous. It does 4 really fantastic things. It lets green-white basically have removal, and that it can fight a creature alongside these really awesome abilities and gets rid of their spells and their enchantments rather. And of course, the late game, you have your treasure cruises. So you get down dorks, you target them with stuff, and you just run them over. You have in the sideboard here, you have Aqueous Form, which is good against the big green decks just to get through their defensive. In Case of Ice, same thing against the green-red decks. Ordeal of Heliod is great against mono-red because you want to gain a bunch of life. Disdainful Stroke is good against control because you want to counter their big spells like Dig Through Time and Crux of Fate, stuff like that. Stubborn Denial, again, also great against control. It stops them from playing their Jace's Ingenuity on turn 5, and of course, if you have a 4 power or more creature, which is really easy to do in this deck, it's just a straight counterspell. Treasure Cruise, same thing, because they're trying to 1-for-1 you and counterspell your stuff over and over, and so you're just like filling your yard with stuff. Well, you get to kind of load back up with Treasure Cruise in ways that they don't, because you run a ton of fetch lands. You have 4 Flooded Strand and 4 Windswept Heath, which is a big deal. So there is Bant Heroic. It's a really sweet deck. Ross Merriam did a great job at playing it, and let's move on to number 2. To kind of go back a little bit, the Bant Heroic is great against Esper Dragons, which is like one of the biggest decks right now in the format. You want to go underneath all these ridiculously huge spells, and that means you get a threat down early, and you keep them scared, and you just destroy them with it, and that's generally what happens. Green Red Dragons by Brad Fallen, in all capitals, very important. Ash Cloud Phoenix. This is your basic sort of green-red ramp deck. You want to get down your Elvish Mystics, you want to get down your Sylvan Caryatids, you're going to build yourself into Courser Crewfix on turn 2 if you have an Elvish Mystic, Thunderbreak Region on turn 3 if you can, then go up to Stormbreath Dragon. Ash Cloud Phoenix is a great threat. Essentially, it's a really great long game because, of course, it keeps coming back and whatnot. And, of course, at the very top end, you have Dragon Lord Atarka. This one plays 3 Xenagos the Reveler. It's a very good Planeswalker right now for the against the green-red, against the Esper decks, the Esper Dragon decks. They don't like you having a source of consistent or persistent advantage and creatures that just kind of come pouring out of this thing. So it lets you get a long-term advantage. And, of course, Planeswalkers are always good against control, as they should be. It's also running 1 Den Protector. This is a fantastic creature that is seeing an absolute ton of play now. I mean, my God, it's like a really, really sweet Eternal Witness, and it sucks it took so long for people to wake up and be like, oh yeah, this creature is like absolutely fantastic. But they're here, and that's great. So you have Draconic Roar, one of the best removal spells in the format, because you can usually, with as many dragons as this thing has, you can hit them in the face. You got 10 dragons in this thing, which is crazy. 2 Crater's Claws, which is the fireball that ends games, and of course Roast to kill all the Siege Rhinos or the big dorks that are in your way. Sideboard, you have Arbor Colossus, great against the other dragon decks because you want to kill their Stormbreath Dragons, you want to kill their Thunderbreak Regions. Yeah, you'll take 3 if you do so. who cares? Ash Cloud Phoenix, again, good against control because it just keeps coming back if they try to kill it. Den Protector is great against the is great in the long game. It's good in the mirror because you want to get back your threats. You're kind of sort of bouncing creatures off each other. You want to get back your roasts and whatnot. Hornet Nest, which is really good against Bant Heroic and Heroic decks in general because they don't want to like smash into this thing. Of course, if they have Aqueous Form, that's a problem. But if they don't, this is going to stop them for a good long while. Plummet, good against the Dragons decks, good against the Mirror. Nissa Worldwaker, Planeswalkers are good against control. That's just how Planeswalkers work, as we discussed. And you get consistent advantage and new threats every turn, and that's a big deal. Anger of the Gods, good against token decks, good against sort of the weenie decks, the mono red aggros, of course, of the world, and any sort of aggro decks like the green white aggro, the Abzan aggro. You want to be able to just exile those creatures forever. Roast, good against Siege Rhino.deck. And Seismic Rupture is fantastic and destroys all the manifests and all the little dorks, all the tokens, all the mono red aggros. It's a fantastic card. So, Green Red Dragons is really sweet. You play this deck because you like to run into big, fat, nasty creatures and smash into the red zone, which is good. Green Red Dragons is good against the aggro decks because it kind of sort of keeps going. It has all the removal early in the game and is able to play big threats late. And it seems pretty decent against the Abzan decks of the world because you're just able to play really big threat after really big threat. They all have evasion, which is very important because they're all flying, and a lot of them have haste with your Stormbreath Dragons and whatnot, and that's a big deal. You have your Dragon Lord Atarkas, that's getting its bonus regardless of whether or not they kill it right away or whatever. And as a result, you're able to kind of go up and over. Not great against just straight control because they can kind of stop you if they sort of one-for-one you enough. But generally, you have a ton of threats and you're able to run over a lot of people as a result. All right. Third place is Abzan Aggro by Kyle Boggemes. He made ninth place at the Pro Tour. Wrote a whole article where he was like, dude, like blue-black control is the stuff, and blue-black control is the greatest thing ever, and then he plays Abzan Aggro. Cracking me up. Anyway, Abzan Aggro is the aggro deck. It's what you want to do when you want to play guys first. You want to get down the Warden of First Tree. You want to go into Fleece Main Line and or Heir of the Wilds or Rakshasa Dealer. Really good 2-mana drops there. Excuse me. You have your 4 Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino is absolutely incredible. And this deck really kind of showcases that. You have 2 Wingmate Rock, which is a fantastic turn 5 play because you're just like swimming in the red zone over and over. Anafenza, 3-mana 4/4. That's a big deal. Tasker the Golden Fang is fantastic. Usually a 1-mana 4/5 with a sweet 4-mana ability stacked right onto it. I'm probably going to feel bad forever that I didn't give it the credence that it should have gotten when I first saw it in the set review, but whatever. You have Abzan Charm, which is the thing. It's a fantastic charm, does all sorts of great things. It kills their Siege Rhinos, it draws you cards, it gets through their defenses. There's a lot of sweet stuff going on. Dramoka's Command, we talked about it in Bant Heroic. Slices, Dices, does absolutely everything in this metagame. Every mode is important. Every mode can help and do things in ways that can really surprise you. Hero's Downfall, the best removal in the format. Just kill target thing, whether it's a creature or a planeswalker. That's a big deal. Valorous Stance is the second best removal, I think, in the format. It kills the Siege Rhino, protects your dude. That's a big deal. So you're aggressive, you want to bash in, you want to get things going early and keep the pressure on. This is the kind of deck that makes threats that have to be answered. Like, you have to answer Rakshasa Death Dealer or it will just kill you. Like, you have to block it or you have to accept that you're going to take a whole bunch of damage. And when you try to remove it, they still can regenerate it, so that's important. Siege Rhino, best 4-drop in the format, stuff like that. So like, you're able to play a ton of really awesome threats with some really sweet removal behind it, and that's always a good sort of combination. Den Protector is good against the mirror. It is good in the long game against the sort of the 1-for-1s that remove your dudes and kind of keep you going throughout the game. Ultimate price, removal is removal. Removal is as removal does. So when you're playing the other aggro decks, when you're playing the mono reds of the world, like the big green decks, like you want to have just like kill that thing. Thanks a lot. Like nice Courser, yada yada. Kill that stuff. Valorous Stance, again, good against Courser decks, good against Siege Rhino decks. That's important. Elspeth Sun's Champion, obviously great against control, because as we've spoken of, you want to have a planeswalker that's able to give you threats and do things. turn after turn as the game goes on. You have 2 Drowning Sorrow, which is good against the token decks, good against the aggro decks, good against the Winu decks, good against the token decks. Those are the best removal that you can have there. Good against Bant Heroic usually. If you can catch them early before they get to build all their stuff up and they're just like playing little threats, you can kill some with this, no problem. Duress and Thoughtseize come in against the control decks of the world, because you want to rip apart their counter spells and their draw spells while you keep playing your big threats. So it's really good. This aggro deck is good against other aggro decks. Is a way to put it. It can kind of go under the sort of the mid-range decks, because it can kind of lay down a threat early and just keep up the pressure before they can get to play like 2 or 3 spells in one turn, which is important. And it's good against control because it can get down a threat and kind of take the game over with it, like a Fleece Mainline, for example, as we're looking at here. That's a really important card. It gets monstrous, it gets hexproof, and it gets really hard to deal with at that point. Of course, they can always get their Elspeth down and start making tokens and yada yada. That's why it's not perfect, but it is a very good threat. Either way, Abzan aggro is really sweet, and congratulations to Kyle for making 3rd place. All right, finally, Esper Dragons. Yes, Esper Dragons. This is the deck of the format. This is the deck that everyone is fighting against and everyone is kind of afraid of at the moment, and it's kind of easy to see why, because it runs like Dragonlord Jeskai, who has proven himself to be absolutely fantastic, one of the best things you can do at 5 mana in the format. Absolutely devastating if it hits just one time, and people want to kill it immediately. Silumgar the Drifting Death, I like Silumgar, like the Dragonlord version, but obviously the Drifting Death works fine. It's really important to note that whenever a dragon you control attacks, creatures that defending player controls get smaller. So if that's an Jeskai and a Silumgar, they're all getting -2/-2, and that is a big deal when it can wipe out like their Manifests and their Mana Dorks and whatever it is. That's pretty scary. You're going to play your Planeswalkers. You have Ashiok, and Gerard Fabiano loves Ashiok so hard. I have seen few people like a Planeswalker as much as Gerard Fabiano likes Ashiok. It's absolutely incredible. But it's good. If you can remove their early guys and get an empty board and get Ashiok on an empty board, like it goes up to 5 immediately and then it goes up to 7, and it can generally find a really good threat. If it goes up to 5 and gets a Siege Rhino, that's a big deal, because now they have to deal 2 damage to Ashiok, or you're getting a free Siege Rhino and Ashiok staying on the table. That's absolutely huge. Can't underestimate that guy. Or girl, or whatever gender that is. Ugin the Spear Dragon, obviously absolutely amazing, because it should be for 8 mana, but it's one of the best things you can do in Standard, of course, because it costs an absolute ton, but it gives you an amazing boost sort of from the get-go. The ability to like play Ugin and then just like in the game has happened often. There's many decks, particularly the mid-range decks of the world, that just want to play like, your Siege Rhinos and your Tassigers and whatever, and you play Ugin and you minus it, and like all of their stuff goes away. Just all of it. Just done. Bye. The end, and the game's over. So you have a bunch of draw spells and a bunch of counter spells, and a bunch of removal. That's all control does, is counter, draw, and kill stuff, and that's what they're there for. Anticipate, find you your threats, find you your counter spells, let you do something on turn 2 when they don't do anything else. Bile Blight, some of the best 2-mana removal in the format, and kills almost anything that they can play on turn 2 as well. Dig Through Time, amazing draw spell, absolutely incredible, and has been fantastic ever since it's been printed. I expect it to be fantastic for years and years. Get your foils, hold on to them, and in a couple years, talk to me when you've like tripled your money. Dissolve, the best counterspell you can play at 3 mana. Obviously, it's Scries. That's really sweet. Dragonlord's Prerogative is terrific as opportunity that can't be countered, because you already have some dragons, and you don't have a ton of dragons, but you have enough that there's a good chance that you're going to have one. Foul Tongue Invocation is the edict that you pretty much have in Standard, that you have to play, because you have to be able to kill Dragonlord or Jeskai. You have to be able to kill those Fleece Mainlines. This is really sweet removal for Bant Heroic, which usually only has 1, maybe 2 threats at any one time. So these edicts that don't target are really important, because they can, like whether or not they become indestructible or hexproof or whatever, like they have to sacrifice it, and that's a big deal. Hero's Downfall, best removal in the format. That's what's going to happen there. Silumgar Scorn is basically counterspell, obviously, when you have a dragon or control one, and that's super powerful. The fact that you have counterspell, that counterspell feeling is just absolutely amazing, and it is just soul crushing, I think, when people play counterspell against a Fleece Mainline or a Seeker the Way. It feels like, wow, like they reprinted counterspell. It feels very impressive. Utter End, some of the best removal in terms of like answer anything. This answers anything out. Answers your outpost sieges and your planeswalkers and, you know, whatever they want to lay out there, it can pretty much get rid of it. Crux of Fate is your Wrath of Gods. You need these to be able to not only save your dragons but kill theirs. Like this card, like, well, it was already sort of like, you know, the damnation for 1 more mana, and now it's just like, what? Because these dragon decks are now super, super good. I really like this card. I like the fact that it exists. I like how it works. I like how it's kind of a blowout on your end if you get it at the right time. That's really important. Sort of the best 1-for-1 thing you could be doing in Standard. Probably, you know, as I've said before, arguably the best card in Standard. You know, and it usually always is, because it just answers anything they could possibly have, no matter if it's a threat or an answer or whatever. Like, it's just, it's what you want to be playing early to disrupt your opponent as much as possible. So your sideboard has a bunch of random one-of things that can go in different matchups. And Bioblight is for the aggressive decks. You want to be able to bring in the removal to kill their stuff early. Great against token decks, obviously, because it'll kill all the tokens. They all have the same name. Disdainful Stroke is great against the control decks because you're able to counter their very expensive spells. Good against the mirror, basically. Dragonlord Prerogative, obviously the same thing, because when it comes to the mirror, you want to be the one who's drawing 4 cards. Yes, I'm serious. No, you can do nothing about it. That's a big deal. Foul Tongue Invocation, great against Bant Heroic, great against other Dragonlord or Jutai decks, and great, you know, just like against the aggro decks in general, like whether they're just playing Abzan aggro or whatever. Like, okay, sure, get rid of your Anafenza, and if I have a dragon, I gain 4 life, and that's obviously important. Against aggressive strategies, Ultimate Price, good against big green decks, good against mono red decks, good against, you know, just the creature decks that are trying to kill you early. It's not great against the Abzan aggro because they have so many multicolored creatures, but it still gets Wingmate Rock, still gets Ward on the first tree, stuff like that. There are still options there. Dragonlord Silumgar, again, I like the Silumgar Dragonlord a little bit more than Drifting Death. However, it's just, you know, it's a fantastic creature. It's it is Sower of Temptation, like, you know, version 2.0, bigger, scarier, and can take you planeswalkers, and that's really fantastic. I like that card a lot. Narset Transcendent, that card is super sweet, and it's great in the mirror. It's great against control decks. If you're able to play this on an empty board, which you normally can in those types of scenarios, you can just run away the game with it. It doesn't have like an overwhelming power when it first hits, but it's able to build up such an incredible presence over time that it's just overwhelming. Drown in Sorrow, good against aggro, good against mono red, good against token decks, good against anything that has small creatures in it. And Duress is good in the mirror. Let's see if there's any other cards. It's good against other control decks, as you do. Oh, yeah, there are. So we have Duress against the mirror. 3 self-inflicted wounds. Because why? Because Abzan aggro, because Siege Rhino. I mean, like, green creatures, like white creatures, they're just absolutely everywhere. And this card is, like, really great. Not only do they have to lose their thing or lose their Siege Rhino, like, they have to lose 2 life too, which is really awesome. And One Thoughtseize, good against the mirror, good against the big dragon decks when you want to take their Atarka before they resolve it, and just sort of a great 1-for-1, no matter what you're facing. So yeah, so there's Esper Dragons by Gerard Fabiano. This is the deck that everybody's talking about, and is like it's going to be the biggest force in Standard. It's currently the best deck. I don't know if that's true because things keep changing, and that's why the Standard environment is awesome. But it is certainly a fantastic option if you like control decks. 5th place, Bant Midrange by Mullen. So Collins here, let's take a look. Collins here is running the big green deck, basically. I mean, look at how much sort of green is in here. You have Deathmist Raptor and 4 Den Protector. These are the key to this deck. These are why this deck is powerful, because Deathmist Raptor is crazy powerful, great in multiples, absolutely fantastic. And Den Protector not only can bring back all the Deathmist Raptors, it can bring back your best spell otherwise, which is usually a Dromoka's Command or a Valorous Stance. And I mean, you're not going to be Master Insane. It doesn't matter because it's Den Protector. You can take back literally anything. You're able to get the beats going early with Elvish Mystic into Sylvan Caryatid into Courser of Crufix. At that point, you can start dropping your threats, which include Fleecemane Lion and Dragonlord Jutai. Here's your white blue that kind of pops in there randomly, and here's your 4 Surok, or your 2 Surok the Huntcaller rather. I was looking at the 4 mana. Your 2 Surok the Huntcallers, which are super good, and with just a Fleecemane Lion, like, you're off to the races, man. And when you have a Surok out on turn 3 usually, and followed up by Dragonlord Jutai on turn 4 that you can give haste to, that's a huge deal, and can just absolutely win games out of nowhere. That's 10 damage damage by itself. Mastery of the Unseen is kind of a green, white, blue Mastery of the Unseen deck, because late game, when you have all this mana, you have all these Elvish Mystics and Sylvan Carriers, sometimes they'll just kill all of your threats, and then you'll play a Mastery of the Unseen, and you'll just start, just grinding out those manifests, and that lets you do something with all this mana that you don't always have something to do with. Dromoka's Command, just amazing, absolutely does everything, slicing and dicing, while Valorous Stance is some of the best removal in the format when you're not playing black. It's pretty much what you got. Hornet's Nest in the sideboard is good against Bant Heroic, because they don't want to run their one monstrous thing into your thing. Good against other big green decks, because they don't want to run their guy into the Hornet Nest to give you all these free bees. You have 2 Encase in Ice, which is necessary because you need an answer to Stormbreath Dragon, because Stormbreath Dragon can kick your butt. It has protection from your removal and protection from Dromoka's Command, so you can't fight it. That's a big deal. Disdainful Stroke, also good against green-red dragons, counters their Thunderbreak Regent and their Stormbreath Dragon. It's great against control because it counters their dig through times and the Jace's Ingenuities and stuff like that. Another Dromoka's Command, good against the mirror, good against the aggressive decks when you're able to just fight their dudes. Even if it's just, against mono red, for example, I will just put a counter on my Sylvan Carriated, so now it's a 1/4, and I'll have it fight, your 1 mana dude, your 1 mana dork, your Lightning Berserker, whatever it is. And that can win games right there, where you just have a 1/3 that they can't ever target, or 1/4 rather, that they can't ever target, that is able to block anything they're able to push in the red zone. That can turn games around. Negate, great against control. You bring this in as a strictly control card. You want to stop their counter spells so you can resolve your threats. You want to be able to stop their dig through times, their Ugins, their perilous vaults, stuff like that. You want to be able to not let them play those spells. To plummet, you need answers for the green-red dragons. You're able to kill those dragons out of the sky, your Stormbreath dragons, your Thunderbreak Regents, your Dragon Lord whatevers. It's obviously good against Esper dragons because they play a lot of dragons. That's kind of how it works. And Glare of Heresy exiles your Elspeth, it exiles your Siege Rhinos. It's great against mid-range decks and Abzan mid-range decks. Bant mid-range itself is good against aggro decks because it's able to establish some really cool threats. Really early Master of the Unseen can bring you back from games that you had no right sort of winning at that point, because you're able to just grind out these manifests. You're able to flip up 1 creature, you're gaining life for every creature you have. That's huge. Kind of good against going up and over the green-red decks because you have some really sweet threats. But you also have all this recursion. Death Mist Raptor is really hard to block. Dim Protector is really hard to kind of get around because you're able to keep getting back these threats that they're answering more or less with combat damage, or they're using stuff like their Crater's Claws or their Roasts or whatever. And you're like, sure, I'll flip out my Dim Protector and I'll get back Dromoka's Command and I'll bring back a Death Mist Raptor. That is a huge amount of value that you're generating right there. So it's not the greatest against control decks. Control decks can kind of, if they answer it in the right way, if they're able to use their Perilous Vaults to exile the stuff, then you can kind of get to a place where they just have too much of an overwhelming advantage. They draw way too many cards. That's tough. But ultimately, this is a really sweet deck, and it's good for those who like to sort of grind out value while playing some really sweet creatures. Boom, boom. Jeskai Tokens. Jeskai Tokens by Alex Zurawski. Oh man, this is what I get for trying to pronounce names rather. Okay, so Jeskai Tokens, it runs 4 Secret Way, and it runs a bunch of dudes through tokens. You have 4 Jeskai Ascendancy. Jeskai Ascendancy is absolutely amazing with spells like Raise the Alarm, which makes 1/1 soldiers. Secure the Waste, which makes as many 1/1 soldiers as you want. It's great with Dragon Fodder because Dragon Fodder leads into Hordling Outburst, and then you have 3 1/1s, and that's great. You're able to fill your graveyard up so you can play your treasure cruises, because all these spells that are making dudes are also cards that are going in your graveyard, and that's important. You have a bunch of removal at that point. You have Stoke the Flames, which is the best burn spell in the format, and you're able to use the tokens that you create to play it with Convoke, and those creatures don't need to have haste. You can just use them as soon as they enter the battlefield. So you'll play Hordling Outburst, you'll have 3 of them and another land, or 3 of them and another creature, and then be able to play Stoke the Flames to kill their Stormbreath Dragons, or their I don't know, their 4 power, their 4 toughness guys like Courser Crewfix, stuff like that you have to get through. The idea is you're able to get Jeskai Ascendancy down, because Jeskai Ascendancy is a very, very powerful card, particularly once it's on the battlefield. It's absolutely amazing, because any spell that you resolve at that point, or any spell that you just play, doesn't even have to resolve. You're able to loot. You're able to draw a card and discard a card. Call that looting. And that's something that is super, super powerful, and it gives all your creatures bonuses. So if you're able to play 1 spell and 2 spell and 3 spell, inside an attack step, you gave all your guys +3/+3. You're able to draw 3 cards and discard 3 cards. That is amazing. Particularly when your spells like Anticipate get cards like replace themselves. So Anticipate looks at the top 3, you get one. Well, what happens, the way it stacks is that, you're going to announce your spell, and that loot trigger is going to go on top. So before you Anticipate, you get to draw and discard, and then you get to resolve Anticipate. So Dig Through Time, again, with Jeskai Ascendancy is absolutely amazing, but by itself, it's still great. Lightning Strike, the best damage to mana cost in terms of ratio right now in Standard is as good as you're going to get, or close as you're going to get to Lightning Bolt. Stoke the Flames, as we talked about, works great with tokens. Best burn spell in the format. Valorous Stance is killing your Siege Rhinos of the world, which is really what it's for, to kill the Tassigers and the Siege Rhinos and the Wingmate Rocks and stuff like that. Like, those things have to die. You can't let those things kind of hang out. Wild Slash is good just against the random dorks. They play an Elvish Mystic, you kill it. They play Air of the Wilds, you kill it. Like this is a spell that they play Hero of Iroas. Like, great, get out of here. Thing's terrible. In the meantime, you're wanting to play your Seeker, which is obviously great from all these spells they're able to play. Your Anticipate makes them a 3/3 with lifelink. Your Raise the Alarm makes them the same way. Like, those spells just kind of add up, and that damage adds up over time. And this is just sort of like a quick kind of get you deck that if it gets going and if it has the right draw and you don't disrupt it too much with Thoughtseize, then you're able to really get a game plan going, and it gets pretty scary pretty fast. On the sideboard, as we've seen, like, you'll see a lot of these sideboards they look a lot the same because they're sideboard cards for a reason, and they're very great they're very good sort of scalpels against certain matches, but not great in other times. Disdainful Stroke, great against control. Counters their Crux of Fates, their Dig Through Times, their Perilous Faults. That's important. Negate, same reason. Countering, honestly, the same spells. Valorous Stance, killing the Siege Rhinos. Gotta kill them dead. Go away. You're bad. The Siege Rhinos and the Tassigers and so on. Dragonlord Ojutai is a fantastic card against control. If you're able to play it, then it has hexproof. If you're able to get Jeskai Ascendancy with it, because Jeskai Ascendancy has this little wording right here, because the card didn't do enough. You untap the creatures that get you +1/+1. Play a non-creature spell, +1/+1, untap those creatures. Well, guess what? Dragonlord Ojutai has hexproof while it's untapped. So if you attack and the heroes downfall it, and you play a non-creature spell with Jeskai Ascendancy in play, not only will Dragonlord Ojutai become a 6/5, that's fair, you get to untap him, now he has hexproof, and their spell will be countered because the targets are no longer legal, because they have to be when the spell finishes resolving. You have In Hostilities, which is a fantastic card, and able to do a lot of really sweet things. Obviously, against the green decks, you want to kill those guys, the green-red aggro decks, the green-red dragons decks, like Wrath of God is powerful and is important. One Glare of Heresy, killing your Siege Rhinos and your Elspeths, just get out of here. Good against Bant midrange, Bant midrange, yes, but also really good against Bant heroic, because they only have like 1 or 2 threats. Almost all of their threats, at least all that I can think of, are white. Battle-wise, Hoplite is white-blue, but still white, so that counts. Seismic Rupture, as we've discussed before, kills all the manifest, kills all the little dorks, great against tokens, great against mono red aggro, just sweeps the board. People run right into this thing. Even now, I feel like a lot of people just don't expect this to even exist, let alone have anyone be playing against them. Okay. So we have Esper Dragons. Now let's just take a quick look. Let's see how his is different. So this guy is running a few more, I think, of Dragonlord Ojutai's, or maybe one more. And no Ashioks, because as they do. But otherwise, it's more or less the same deck. I'm not going to go over it very much. You can go back and check out the Gerard Fabiano decklist review there, because it's basically the exact same deck with a few small differences, just being, I guess, the dragon count. All right. So we have Abzan Aggro by Connor Bowman, and that's the same reason I'm not going to go over that deck. So what I am going to go over as a bonus here, all right, finally I want to talk about 5-color blue dragons. This is like the hottest deck to come out of this weekend. It is Flores' deck that he won the PTQ with, the regional Pro Tour qualifier. It is mono blue with like 5 different colors of dragons, or 4 different colors of dragons in this thing. You start with your, look at all the dragons here. This is great. You have 2 Icefall Regents, which is my preview card. Card is sick, I told you. 1 Dragonlord Atarka, which is absolutely massive, of course, and great in-game. Dragonlord Dramoka, which apparently was like the all-star. This is just Baneslayer Angel that can't be countered for 1 more mana, with 2 more toughness. Like, it's really, really sweet. Dragonlord Ojutai is really great when paired with Dragonlord Dramoka, but let's face it, if you have 2 Dragonlords out, it's kind of absurd anyway. But Ojutai obviously being the best thing you can do at 5 mana, particularly as a Dragon Lord. And Silumgar is also fantastic at 6 mana, which is important because this spell just answers everything. You want your 1 Ugin. This thing runs 27 lands. That's a lot. And in the article, Patrick Chapin's talking about them running actually 1 more land, which is a ton of lands. But you need your lands to cast all these ridiculously huge spells. And the whole deck is built around this engine of Crucible the Spirit Dragon, because Crucible allows you to just put counters on it, like they do nothing, you put a counter on it. They do nothing, you put a counter on it. You just keep doing that turn after turn after turn. And then all of a sudden, you got like 5 free mana to play Dragon Lord Ojutai with all the rest of your mana untapped. So you still have all your counterspell mana, all your card draw mana up, and you just like tap this 1 land for like 5 mana and just play a huge monster. And that's huge. That's absolutely huge. Haven the Spirit Dragon, as we've already found out from the green-red dragon decks, is able to get back your best threat, or Ugin. Like this spell, this land is absolutely amazing and just really pushes how good lands are in terms of their effects. Like this thing seems absolutely pushed. Like we live in a world where this land is possible, and where I think 10 years ago, there's no way this thing would ever see anything close to this mana cost in terms of getting cards back, being able to get back the Planeswalker as well, like being able to cast for, tap for any color of mana. This land keeps going. Like it's a good on top of great. And then you have sort of your blue spells. Everything at that point becomes a mono blue deck. You have your Perilous Vault to answer all the things. Encase and Ice, main deck. Yes, main deck. Because look at how many freaking options it has. Like everything in standard, you got your Fleece main lines, your Rakshasa Death Dealers, your Siege Rhinos. Red or green, you got your Stormbreath Dragons, your Thunderbreak Regents, your Dragon Lord Atargas. Like, yeah, maybe they did something when they entered the battlefield, but you don't want them to kill you. And you can play this at instant speed, which is super important. And like, it's so good against everything everyone's playing right now. Like, it's only bad in a few very small situations, and it's so good in the situations it is good in that it's just overwhelmingly easy to justify playing it in the main deck. Anticipate, obviously a really good draw spell, but it's interesting how they're talking about removing it because they don't think it's really good enough in terms of what you're doing on turn 2 and what you want to be doing, which I thought was really interesting. All right, so next we have Dig Through Time, and obviously it's the best draw spell in standard. I mean, like probably pound for pound. Maybe Treasure Cruise is better, but of course Treasure Cruise requires its own sort of stuff to work. But obviously great in the control decks. It's exactly what you want to be doing, looking at 7 cards and getting the best 2. Disdainful Stroke, good against the meta, good against Siege Rhino, good against Wingmate Rock, good against other control decks. Like when people are all running 4+ mana spells, like you want to be able to counter them, and it generally has a good option, whether it's a Planeswalker or a creature or whatever it is. For Dissolve, best counter spell in the format. You want to be able to run a whole playset of it. Dragon Lord's Prerogative, a great draw spell. It's going to be uncounterable, basically guaranteed, and that's important for an opportunity. And you want to get those cards in, Nullify, which is great because you are the control deck. You're a super control deck, so you want to be able to 1-for-1 their Rakshasa Death Dealers, their Siege Rhinos, their Tassigers, their huge Dragon Lords, whatever it is. Like it's not really going to be used on the aura side, but it's certainly going to be used on the creature side. It really is just Remove Soul, which is counter target creature spell, but it can just do both because reasons. Silumgar Scorn in this deck is absolutely counterspell. Like, you remember when I was saying earlier where it kind of feels like it really feels dirty, but when you play in a deck that has like 4 or 5 dragons, but it feels gross in a deck with 10 of them, like where you're basically guaranteed that this is counterspell. This is blue counter target spell, and that is a huge deal. The fact that they basically reprinted counterspell and gave you a deck that absolutely works with it it's mono blue. How could it not work in that regard? So it's got a bunch of temples in it. It runs the Temple of Deceit. It runs 4 Temple of Enlightenment, which is the best temple. Temporal Mystery, which is right behind it. So you can play your Dragon Lord Jamokas and Dragon Lord Atarkas. Those all require green mana, which is important. It runs 1 Voyage's End, and this is where Patrick is like, this kind of Michael's pet card, and it's a fine card, but it doesn't do much against the tokens and doesn't do really great against mono red, but it's okay. But regardless, it will put your opponent back behind a turn. It kind of sucks to Voyage's End a Siege Rhino, which is why I don't really like it personally, but it's obviously great against Stormbreath Dragons, or Dragon Lord Atarkas that do nothing. Like if you have no creatures and they play like Badoom, and you're like, all right, whatever, just bounce it in your hand and I'll get a whole new turn of doing stuff. Maybe drawing a counter spell, maybe getting a draw spell, whatever it is. I'm just not getting hit with an 8/8 monster. You're a 4 Master of Ways. This guy brings in a bunch of dorks and is able to stop the bleeding of the red aggro decks, which is important. You have your 4 Omen Speaker, which are good against the weenie decks, but and also good against some of the aggro decks. It turns on their Bile Blights, which kind of sucks, but regardless, you need a small creature that's able to get you to your answers and to your removal in case of ice. Again, as we spoke, so good it's in the main deck. That's how good it is. So if you just want to add more to that because you absolutely know they have green or red creatures that you want to target, that's all the better. Disdainful Stroke, which is fantastic against the Mirror, good against control, good against mid-range, just overall fantastic spell. Dragonlord's Prerogative against the Mirror, you want to be able, or not so much the Mirror, what I'm saying is control, my apologies. 5-color Dragons is really sort of a ridiculously control deck, a ridiculously good control deck because it just won the RPTQ like, you know, hot knife through butter and whatnot, as I understand it. So yeah, this is a very important spell. It's very, very good against control decks where you have to be able to get through it. It's just guaranteed, just like Silumgar Scorn is a guaranteed counterspell. This is a guaranteed uncounterable opportunity, which is important. Negate against the control decks to stop their Perilous Faults, stop their Planeswalkers, stop their Crux of Fates, like whatever. You want to shut that stuff down. Dragonlord Atarka, good against the mid-range decks because you're able to kind of ramp into it and able to kind of just, you know, sweep their board. Good against sort of the obviously the aggro decks that aren't just like straight, I think, mono red aggro. I'm going to read about this more, see sort of how they use this guy because I'm interested. Dragonlord Silumgar, however, is good against the mid-range decks, good against the control decks. When they, like, you know, finally slam down an Ugin at 8 mana, and you're like, that's great. Dragonlord Silumgar, that's mine now. That's not yours, that's mine. So that's always good. And the Drifting Death, which is great because it has hexproof, good against mid-range decks, good against the weenie decks, because if you can power it out early enough, obviously a 3/7 hexproof is just unkillable. And if you can start wiping away their dorks, that's even better. You know, good against, it's a good card against control because it has hexproof because you want to create a creature that they can't counter. Not so good, maybe not so good against mono red aggro. Let's not get hasty here. It's a 6 mana spell. But it is good. It is good against control. You want to be able to hit a threat that they can't target, that they have to remove with their Crux of Fates or their Perilous Faults that you can kind of play around and make sure that they're not able to resolve. But overall, this is the deck that more or less said that like Crucible the Spirit Dragon is a real card that is making a real deck. Obviously, Flores comes out with this absolutely insane deck he built with Patrick Chapin. I love it. Like, I love Dragonlord Jamoka that they were saying was just absolutely awesome. I was waiting for this Dragonlord to be great, and it's absolutely great. So that is awesome. I was waiting, and I was afraid that I was like missing something. I was like, this card is so sweet. It's just like, yes, it's a Timmy's dream because it does all these really cool things, but like, it's good and constructed, right? I mean, look at all those abilities, man. It can't be countered. It's a huge monster. They have to answer it. Yes, it dies to removal, but whatever. Like, dice removal is a thing. Who cares? But this in and of itself is fantastic. So this is the 5-color Blue Dragons deck. This is the hottest deck in the metagame right now. And this is really turning, like, everyone's like, whoa, what? And everyone has to be prepared for this. People are going to be playing this coming weekend. I think it's really great. And congratulations to Flores and Chapin for building this deck. And Flores, obviously, for playing it to the top, which was fantastic. And for joining me for the Decklist review. I had a really good time. I'm glad you guys could hang out with me. And until next time, Magic players, this is Evan Irwin, tapping the cards so you don't have to.
I always like the fatties.